it was all about what we called servant leadership, meaning you have to look within yourself. You have to lead by serving. In other words, you don't come in as a dictator and say, do this, do this, do this. No, you have to do it with them. You have to show them that you're doing it, that you're changing, that you're moving in that direction. I think that goes back to Kotter. That's really what he was saying, is that we need to be servant leaders. We're not dictators.
Welcome to Great Practice, Great Life by Atticus Incorporated. What if you could hang out with successful small and solo law firm attorneys, ask them about their successes and failures, their business strategies and mindset habits, then take an insight or two to guide your own growth in your practice? Each week, Steve Riley shares an in-depth look at how to work less while maintaining high client service standards, reduce your stress levels while growing your income, and find time to make changes when you are time-starved. Steve is a lawyer coach for more than 20 years and a former trial attorney. His goal is to provide strategies to help you balance your lives and grow your practice. Now, here's Steve.
Hey, Steve Riley. Welcome to this episode of Great Practice, Great Life. And today we're featuring board-certified trial lawyer, an attorney who's built a fantastic plaintiff's practice, Doug Burnetti. So, Doug, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, Steve.
Oh, it's our pleasure. It's great to have you here today. For people who don't know you, could you describe a little bit about your practice and where you're at and how your firm works, just so they have a sense, because we have all kinds of different practitioners that listen to this show.
Sure. We're primarily located in Central Florida, although we cover the entire state. Actually, we have cases out of the state also, but primarily Florida. But our offices are all within Central Florida. We have 8 offices now, I think it is, with our 2 largest offices in Tampa and Lakeland, but several offices from Sarasota all the way up to North Pinellas County.
That's fantastic. Fantastic. And you've got a great reputation, and you've grown quite a, fabulous practice. So I'd like to talk to you just for a few minutes about, from your perspective, as you look back and you think about the success that you've had in the firm, and I know there were some challenges. What do you think the 3 biggest challenges were for you to grow your practice the way that you have?
Right. Well, you have to remember, we started in 1994. It was just me and one secretary. The challenges then, I think, were different than the challenges would be if you were starting today. Back then, there was a lot of anti-advertising sentiment. So the legal community, when I first started, and I started advertising right away because that was the only way I knew how to get cases, there was a lot of pushback, a lot of negativity. Now, it's kind of the opposite. There is so much competition. So I would say right now, if I was walking out and starting a brand new practice, me as a new lawyer, the biggest challenge is competition. And how do I break into the market of personal injury, which is what our firm does. It's 100% personal injury type of work. So that's what I would say is the biggest challenge. Probably the second biggest challenge is something that is very new to all of us since COVID. And I kind of smile because it's become a topic of discussion with my management team at least twice a week. And that is trying to get talent, whether it be a support staff or a lawyer. I mean, right now it's just very difficult to hire the talent to keep up with the growth. So that's a big one right now. That's one we didn't really experience pre-COVID. The third, I would say, there's a lot of challenges, but the third one would probably be technology. Technology is changing so rapidly that either you keep up or you get left behind. Our firm has been very fortunate that we're kind of on the leading edge of a lot of technology. In fact, we just did some beta testing for one of the programs that we work with. They chose us because we're into that kind of thing. So technology is a big one because if you're not paperless right now, it's difficult. It's practice.
Yeah, it's amazing how many lawyers that are still paper centric in their practices. I find it fascinating. I can't imagine how they would do it.
No, it's a real challenge, especially for the older guys like me. I've been doing this since 1990, so it was quite a challenge for me personally to switch. The younger lawyers, it's a lot easier for them. They just picked it up right away. But we did it. We forced ourselves to do it about, let's say, we started it probably 10 years ago. And finally, about 6 or 8 years ago, we said, no, that's it. Let's do it.
Well, let's take apart each challenge if you're okay with it. I'd like to spend some time talking about the competition, because before we start the podcast, you said something really funny that I enjoyed. I've heard another very famous plaintiff's lawyer use the same thing. So some of the concerns people have coming on the show, they're afraid to share their secret sauce or their secret strategy. You had a really, really funny response to that. So why are you not afraid sharing your ideas, like how to grow, how to move the practice forward?
Years ago, probably 10 years ago, if you had asked me, I said, no, I don't want to share all of our business information. But what I've learned is I can tell 20 lawyers the information, and maybe one, can execute on it or will execute on it. So I'm not too worried about sharing, and the few that it can help, that's great. I'd love to talk to them about it.
Why do you think only 1 out of 20 will embrace or be open to learning from you on this?
That's a good question. Maybe it's the humanness in us that we think we know everything, and lawyers probably are pretty bad about that. Maybe it's that. Maybe some of it costs money, and are they willing to sacrifice 50% of their gross to grow for a year? But just could be money, could be pride. I don't know, but for some reason, you can tell them all day long, and they just won't digest it.
Yeah, it's fascinating. It's something that I've heard over and over. When I had a young associate leave my practice, I was very upset one time. And my team leader at the time said, look, I don't know why you're upset. He took some stuff with him. He took some cases with him. But the truth be told, he could take the hard drive, like your entire hard drive, and me, and still couldn't be successful because he wasn't successful here with what he had here with the platform that he had. I'm with you. I find it fascinating that there's just some lawyers that you could say, here's how to do this. And they just won't do it. They just won't do it. And then be incredibly frustrated that it's not working for them. Like this whole practice of law thing's not working for me.
Right. Yeah. There's a great book I read. It's one of the Harvard recommended books, and it's about change. And the title is Escaping, written by an amazing author that used to teach there at the business school.
Could be Kotter. It would be Kotter. Yep,
Yes.
Kotter on change. Yep. I agree. I think
Kotter's book on change. I read it because I was on the leadership committee for this leadership group about 15 years ago, and we all had to read these books. And I heard him speak, and it was one of the most, it had the most impact on me than probably any business leader speech I'd ever attended. And it talked about change, and the reality is that we resist change, and the problem is usually us, right? The leaders, because we're not willing to change. If you're not willing to change, you got problems, especially now. So you were talking about, so what if he takes the hard drive? That's true, because guess what? Everything on that hard drive is probably not going to be any good in 3 to 5 years anyway, because everything just changed. So it's that's what maybe that is what it's all about. It's that humans generally are resistant to change. The ones that are willing to change and to move forward with growth and to change things and test things, experiment, I call it. They're the ones that can take this information and do something with it.
I'm a huge Kotter fan, so let's spend a few minutes on this. When you think back about that presentation that you heard him speak, what was it that you learned, or what was the insight, or what did you walk away from going, okay, that shifted my view about business and life?
You have to remember that he's a PhD science guy, right? So everything he's giving you is he's using empirical data for it. He's doing studies. So he doesn't just tell you this is my opinion like some leadership book. He comes in there with empirical data and says, this, I did the study and this is what I did and da da da. He's able to support his views. And so I think that's probably why it had such a big impact on me, is because he was able to come in with that data and say, here's your problem. This is the problem that you have and most leaders have, is that you're not changing. For whatever reason, you're afraid to progress with the changes that are happening around you. And that's a growth killer. So that's kind of what the gist of his talk was. And once I heard that, and really it just resonated with me. And let me tell you, I am the guy that was guilty of it. I did not want to give up control of what was happening in our law firm, especially the first 10 years. And it took a while for me to come to terms with that and delegate, start stepping back, start moving towards the big picture, which I already knew the big picture, but I wasn't moving towards it. So yeah, Kotter is amazing. The guy's brilliant.
So let's stay here for a minute, because I think you nailed a major issue that a lot of attorneys don't quite appreciate, because his first book was called Leading Change, and he walks through 8 steps of change management. And he was trying to teach people just what you're talking about, that if you're a leader and you're in a role where you're trying to help navigate change in an organization, it's one thing to strategically say, okay, this is the most important thing to change. It's a whole other thing to go through, and I'll put a link in the show notes, but he goes through like 8 steps. Now, it's fascinating, Doug, because in our group programs, in the Dominate Your Market program, one of our growth programs, I spent 2 or 3 work days, about 90 minutes each, not 2 90-minute modules, talking about leading change. And I would say only about 10% of the participants got behind it. The other 90% kind of fell into this trap, which was, look, if everybody else would just do as I say, everything would work. And you nailed it, which was the first thing you got to figure out how to change is yourself, because you have to lead the change. You can't initiate the change by saying, go change this. You actually have to lead the change and get buy-in and lay some groundwork. So you're one of the first lawyers I've had on the podcast that went right to Kotter's work. So when you think about leading change and you think about making change for yourself, how do you think about it? Like, how do you approach it?
I can tell you, because this group I told you I was on the committee of this leadership group in Palm Beach. It was all about what we called servant leadership, meaning that you have to look within yourself. You have to lead by serving. In other words, you don't come in as a dictator and say, do this, do this, do this. No, you have to do it with them. You have to show them that you're doing it, that you're changing, that you're moving in that direction. And I think that goes back to Kotter. That's really what he was saying, is that we need to be servant leaders. We're not dictators. So that's how I've done it since then, is that I believe in servant leadership. And a big part of that is caring. Okay. Empathy. Now I'm starting to talk about the things that I get really passionate about. I feel like we as leaders have to be empathetic to the people that you're working with. And I'm not saying that you feel sorry for them and you coddle them. That's not what I'm talking about. You have to look at it from their perspective, the job they're doing, look at it from their perspective and provide them the tools, provide them the training to do it right. Sitting back and giving orders and saying, follow this policy and procedure, follow that policy and procedure, that's a little part of it, but you have to do it as a servant leader where you're doing the exact same thing. You can't just preach to them. You have to be with them.
Oh, I love it. I love it. When do you think you made that shift?
I shifted to the servant leadership idea probably in about 2000. No, I would say it was probably like the end of the 90s. So I started in 94, so probably like 1999 to 2000 when I started moving in that direction. And I'll tell you what, it was like by force. We were growing like crazy. Our firm started with me and a secretary. And we were one of the first law firms in our area to be advertising. And we started growing really fast. And it was just too much for me. And I was controlling and trying to control everything. So I'm trying reaching out, trying to figure out, what do I do? How do I deal with this? And realized I can't just be a dictator and say, do this, do this, do this, do this to try to keep my head above water. I have to start delegating and trusting and training and caring for people and, making customer service the number one value. I know there's a lot that I just said, but it all kind of hones down to servant leadership. That's really what it hones down to.
But it's great stuff. I mean, it's really great stuff. I know a lot of young lawyers that when they come into our community and they want to grow their plaintiff firm or any firm, quite frankly, they're like, well, if people would just do what I say, or maybe I need to have greater systems, I need to have greater process. And really, really what you're addressing, at least as I hear it, Doug, is that you shifted your thinking to being more of an empathetic leader, more of a servant leader, and one in which you were positioning yourself as kind of a change agent and a change shepherd, and having empathy for the change process. There's a lot of things that happen when you go ahead and implement something as simple as changing your case management system. Something as simple as how we're going to do intake. There's a lot of changes that impact people. How many people do you currently employ?
We are at about 85.
So 85. So we got 85 team members. And with the 85 team members, you personally can't work with 85 people. How many direct reports do you have that report to you right now?
Well, that's another interesting evolution. We've evolved into what I call an administrative leadership group. So right now I would say 5 direct reports, and it's my leadership group. We meet probably 3 times a week in different ways. So we'll have one big meeting where we're all meeting together, and then I'll meet with them individually. But yeah, I've moved to that. There was a time when I had administrators, and that was my direct report, but just didn't have a lot of success with that.
And so at this point, you've got invested more or less into 5 direct reports that are more, I would guess, group leaders, team leads.
Yeah, it's like I call it an admin group. So like, for example, one person, they primarily work with the case working staff. And then they have a couple of reports to them. So it's broken down. So there's like a hierarchy. I guess I hate to call it a hierarchy, but it's like a hierarchy.
You have to organize it in some way, so our hierarchy is totally fine.
Yeah, and then I have an HR person that same thing, she has a couple people that work with her. And then I have another operations person that's responsible for other things, like, for example, the physical plants, the new office openings. Like, we've opened 2 new offices this year. She's kind of in charge of the physical plant part of things. And then I have a marketing person, but she has several marketing people that work under her. Some that work for the firm and some that work outside. And then I have a call center.
And where's your call center? Do you have it here in the States, or do you have it somewhere else globally, or where do you have it? Do you have it here in the U.S. or?
Here in the U.S. primarily, but with technology now, we can do it anywhere. So we have a couple of people from the Philippines. So we have like 15 people in call center. So some are outside, and I say 15. Not all of them work 100% in the call center. They may just take 2 or 3 take overflow calls.
Gotcha. So they might have a buffer, the buffer for if we're having overflow, they pick it up. So we don't lose the lead. It makes perfect sense to me. I've got a strange question for you. So as you learn to manage and kind of coach your team leaders, how do you talk to them about change? How do you talk to them about empathetic leadership? How do you talk to your team? I guess you call it your administrative team. How do you talk to them about it?
A lot like you and I are talking about it. I'm just open about it. I have them read some books, and they have been with me for at least, I think the shortest is probably 5 years, the longest 10 years. So they've seen the firm go through some great times and some difficult times. And they're also all on board for change, especially positive change. So I think that because of their experience of seeing me go through the change and seeing the firm go through changes, both positive and negative, that they understand the need for it, and they're all for it.
I would imagine that they're much more confident in implementing or leading with change when they watch you invest in change yourself, both as a servant leader and managing change. I would imagine that's a key characteristic of your own leadership style.
Yeah, I believe that. I mean, I do lead by example, because I think that's the best way to do this. Because they're going to do what you do. If I'm a bad example, a poor example, it's going to be problematic for them. I mean, that's just a fact. So one thing that I mentioned, the books I have them read. One key book to me is an old classic. It's called How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie.
Oh, what a great book.
And in my opinion, my humble opinion, that book contains every concept that you would need to be a servant leader. Now, there's a lot of new books, right? But you can almost always trace back the concept to that book.
Yeah.
From what I've seen.
So who turned you on to that book? Do you remember?
Oh, gosh. I don't even remember. I read that book probably 30 years ago for the first time, and now I read it at least once every 2 years.
I want to interrupt this conversation with Doug just to tell you about something very important and very special. I got permission to talk to you about this. For the first time ever, Atticus is rolling out a program just for trial attorneys. It's called the Great Practice, Great Life Journey for Trial Lawyers. And if you make your living doing contingency fee work of any kind, whether you're doing disability law, PI law, med mal law, I don't care. Whatever you're doing that's contingency fee based, this program is designed for you. Now, this is something that has been requested for years. I mean, years by our Atticusans, by the Atticus membership. So if you're an alumni, if you're in our audience, and you are thinking, wow, I'd like to really join a group of my peers so I can learn faster and increase my speed by which I learn, increase the accountability, this is really an invitation for you. As you listen to Doug, you can appreciate that there are certain challenges in the contingency fee practice area. Now, as a recovering PI lawyer, I hate when that big case becomes a small case. I hate when the cash flow dries up. I hate the ebb and flow of trial work. It causes a lot of stress. So this program is really designed to help you create a reliable, growing income stream in your practice and regain your focus and protect your time and energy. So as you listen to Doug, I want you to think, how could I apply some of the things I'm learning from Doug faster in my practice? So this is distinct from one-on-one coaching that we do. This is a group program designed just for people that make their living doing contingency fee work. So if you have interest in this, you can either click the link in the show notes or call Atticus at 888-644-0022. That's 888-644-0022. My recommendation is, if there's something that you think you're interested in, act now, because this is not going to be a large program. This is just going to be a program for lawyers that do contingency fee work, that are really in the trial space. And if you think this is right for you, pick up the phone and act. With that, I hope you enjoy the rest of Doug's interview. Yeah, so I'll put a link in the show notes for anybody on this. So Dale Carnegie is one of the, I don't want to say, I guess one of the grandfathers or godfathers of the self-development movement. You think that's fair, Doug, to say it that way?
Oh yeah, 100%.
When I was 16, my father was an FBI agent, and he got so much money from the Bureau to take courses. And my father didn't want to, he was in Daytona Beach. He didn't want to drive to Orlando to take a course. And somebody had a Dale Carnegie franchise in Daytona Beach, Florida, and talked my dad into buying a course. And my father read How to Win Friends and Influence Enemies. And it was a game changer. And he made me at age 16 read the book. Like, he was like, there's no question. If you want to live in this house and ever eat at my table again, you're going to read this book. That's all there is to it. And I will say that really simple book changed the direction of my life. Everything from how I interacted with people to my teachers to what my college career was like and what my law school career was like. So I'm with you. You're the first guy, though, that's really interesting. So this is a great podcast for me, because you're the first guy that's actually talked to me about John Kotter's book, Leading Change, and you're using it. And then you bring up Winning Friends and Influence Enemies. This is fantastic. So talk to people about what you love about the book, and then I'm going to go through your other list of books, because I'm having a great time with you.
How do we win friends and influence people? I mean, it's so basic, and it provides every tool that you need, I think, to be a positive leader. It's just amazing. I always give this example to some of my lawyers, because I try to get them to read it too, but whether they do or not.
This goes under the 1 out of 20 will do something category.
That's right. Exactly. But for example, smile. That's so simple, right? But just try it. I sometimes, when I first read the book 30 years ago, I just tried it. I walked into the store, interacting with the cashier, and just was smiling. And it just made the whole experience better, right? So that sounds silly and stupid, but it's reality. And, of course, he gets into the more complex interactions than that. But it provides you the basics of just how to interact with people. Don't pick a fight. He talks about that and gives you examples. Of course, when you're handling a case, sometimes that gets compromised a little bit because you're fighting sometimes. But I'm talking about running a business here. Yeah, you don't pick a fight. I mean, if somebody's wanting to fight, you need to figure out the win-win. So it's about win-wins, not win-losses. But things like that, it's just a fantastic book. If you will live by those principles, and not only will it make your business life better, it'll make your personal life better, it'll make your marriage better, or your relationship with your family member better.
So can you think of an example where you use something out of the book in your marriage or with the kids or in your personal life?
I just do it now. I think I just do it automatically because I've read the book so many times. I'm just I'm kind to them. I think about things from their perspective, but I do that with almost everybody. I do that especially with staff and clients. I call it empathy. That empathy is huge. That's where you were asking me earlier what I talked with the admin team about: empathy, customer service. What makes great customer service? Empathy. I mean, those things, and you can glean all that from that book, and it all fits perfectly. It fits together, and it makes life better, business better.
It's such a simple and wonderful book. My father is 91, has early stage dementia, and will still reference things that he learned from that Dale Carnegie course like 40 years ago. It's really amazing. It's really amazing how much that book shifted. A couple of different books that Dale Carnegie wrote shifted his whole, it shifted the path of his career. Really incredible.
Changed my life, changed my perspective.
That's what great books do, right? They shift how you see the world, they shift how you behave, they shift how you think, and you've adopted so many of those elements of those books. So those are two fantastic books. I love them both. What else, as you look at your list of books that you recommend to 20 lawyers to read, but only one does and the other 19 don't do anything with, what other books jump to your mind?
So before I say what I recommend to lawyers, I'd say the other book I always recommend to, and they've all read it, to my admin team, is The 1 Minute Man. And Ken Blanchard wrote it, and simply because that's just the good management. It's a very practical management book. It gives you a simple diagram of here's how you manage. It's like a 5-step. You'd be surprised how many people struggle with it, but it's very simple. As far as lawyers, the book I required them to read it's called The Fred Factor. It's a very short, simple book, but it's about it's another motivational speaker. I don't know why I'm drawing a blank on his name, but I want to say maybe it was Lencioni, but I can't remember who wrote it. But it's called The Fred Factor, and it's about a postman, and he was just very successful at being a postman. Everyone loved him, and it just talks about him and how he moved and maneuvered through life. It reminds me of the Martin Luther King quote where he talks about the street sweeper, and he says, basically, if you're going to be a street sweeper, then you need to be the best street sweeper that there ever was. Strive to do the best and be the most excellent street sweeper ever. And I'm summarizing it, but that was out of one of Martin Luther King's speeches. And his point was, whatever you're doing, be the best at it. It doesn't matter if you're a street sweeper. It doesn't matter if you're the president of the United States. Be the best at it, do it honorably, and be happy to do it.
So The Fred Factor was written by Mark Sanborn.
Sanborn, that's right.
And why do you recommend that to lawyers? I know you kind of said it with the Martin Luther King speech, but why do you recommend it to lawyers or anyone?
Because I love the example of the postman. I mean, he was happy in his career. The way he treated people had a lot to do with that, because he's treating people with super positivity and happiness, and they're responding to that positively and with happiness. So guess what? That makes him happier. So listen, as lawyers, it's stressful, and you can get yourself burned out, and you can become very unhappy if you're not careful, if you don't keep that in check. And I just feel like the Fred Factor kind of brings that to the forefront and makes you realize, man, if I'm exuding this positivity and this happiness that I'm going over and above and beyond for the people I work with and my clients, it's going to come back tenfold to me. That's my theory.
I love it. I love it. What other books, because you're going through a list of just fabulous books, what other books do you recommend to anyone on your team? Like, I suggest you read this. I suggest you listen to this. What else jumps to your mind?
Yeah, there's only one more that I recommend at this point. There used to be a couple others, but there's only one more that I've been recommending, and this is mostly to my admin team. And I just read it not at the beginning of the year. It's called Leadership and Self-Deception.
Oh yeah, Arbinger Institute.
Yep.
Yep.
And
go ahead and talk about that for a moment.
What an amazing! I'm so glad I read it, because I already knew it. It's one of those things you read it and you're like, I knew that I'm probably somehow standing in the way of myself, or of the group or of business or whatever. And it just points out that that you need to make sure that you are outside of the box, is what they call it. If you're in the box, that means that you're kind of myopic, and you're not seeing things for what they are from the other person's perspective. That's how he defined in the box, which is a little different than the normal definition. If you're out of the box, you're open. You see better. You're not deceiving yourself by closing out, the real things that are happening in the other person's life, in your business, whatever it is. And he gives some pretty good examples, of that that would explain it better than I can explain it. But what the book did, it just opened my eyes to probably what I probably already knew, which was, let's take a business. The business is only going to grow to the extent that its leadership can allow it.
Well, slow down and say that nice and loud.
The business is only going to grow to the extent that the leadership will allow it. And another way of saying that, another way I've heard it, is that the leadership can quell or cap the growth of the business just by who they are and how they do it. And they don't even know it. I didn't even know things that I was doing. So, I wish I'd read this book 20 years ago, because I think I'd probably be further along. But yeah, you can deceive yourself and think that you're doing everything right, it's your way, when in fact you're not doing things right. You're not doing things you're not even doing things the way you want. But somehow you've rationalized, this is what I want. Now that's a mind bender, right? It shows the power of rationalization. But I mean, it's a much more sophisticated book to really read and get your head around.
It's another book that I've assigned in our group programs for our lawyers, and we'll put it in the show notes. But I'm with you. It's one of the more fascinating books I've read. And I think you nailed one of the big issues that we've talked about in the past, on our episodes, and we also talk in our programs. We sometimes call it the leadership lid. And the leadership lid is the growth lid that really contains the growth of the firm. And most lawyers they think it might be, we need more marketing. It might be that we need more this, we need more that. And I think you totally nailed it, Doug. For a lot of firms, the leadership lid is the self-deception of the leadership team, and they can't see it. And that's why it's called self-deception. You just can't see it. And it takes someone to show it to you. One of the powers of working with a coach or being in a group program is other people can point out to you, or at least talk to you in a gentle or sometimes not so gentle way, and say, hey, do you think perhaps how you're approaching this might not be as effective, or maybe you might have a blind spot over here, or why do you think that's working? Why do you think it's not working? So it's a really powerful thing. It's interesting to listen to you, because you've really have done most of the growth inside your organization is directly correlated to the transformative growth that you've gone through personally. Is that a fair statement?
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
100%.
So with that being said, as you look back, where do you think you were stuck the most and why? And how do you unstuck yourself? If you look back and say, well, I was kind of stuck at this spot in the growth of the firm, and I realized this was the issue. Here was the breakthrough in my thinking.
Yeah, I can articulate it. But it's might take me a little bit to articulate it, but the fact of the matter is, like I told you, when we just started really growing fast, and I wasn't ready for it as a leader. So I just was doing the work, right? It's kind of like the book, and I can't remember what it's called, but it's the difference between a technician and an entrepreneur.
It'd be the E-Myth Revisited.
The E-Myth Revisited. That's right. Of course, I've read that also. I was the technician, but I think the difference I had was I knew the big picture ideas, but I got caught up in being a technician because I was pretty good at it and was making a lot of money doing it. But you can only reach a certain, level doing that. And I didn't realize. So I'm busy practicing law like crazy, and trying to do this other stuff kind of on the side, so to speak. And that was the limit. You can only do so much of that. There's only so much of you that can do that. I was not a delegator. I would not delegate. And that was a big problem. When I overcame that, it took a little while. But when I started overcoming that, that's when, it's like, growth can start happening again. And it did. And we grew quite a bit. And we were on a pretty good growth path until probably, I would say 2000-ish, around that. I'd say 2003, 2004. At that time, we ended up having this was another me problem. We ended up having some internal leadership struggles. And I don't want to get too much into that other than just say we had some internal leadership struggles that it took me too long to deal with. It took me about 5 years to deal with it. But that was poison. And when you have internal leadership problems, that was poison. That totally stopped our growth. We just stayed flat. But as soon as that got dealt with, then we started moving up again until COVID. I think COVID affected everybody. But we're back, on that path, probably better than ever. But yeah, most of the, I'm sure any of the businesses you coach, any of the lawyers, if you see those ebbs and flows, it's because of the leader. I mean, I accept responsibility, for the things we did, that happened to our firm that slowed down growth. That's why I'm all for, reading these type of books, keeping yourself in check, having real leaders that are working with you that aren't afraid to tell you, when something's wrong or when you're doing something wrong, which I have that now more than ever, which is great. So yeah, I'm sorry, that was a long way of getting to when did it start. It's, been a couple of times. It's ebbed and flowed when we've had times where I've restricted the growth.
It takes a lot of courage to acknowledge that, Doug. So I'm real impressed. It takes a lot of courage to say, the growth has been restricted by me, not by anything else. I have been the lid upon the growth of the firm. My inability to handle something or not seeing something the way probably should have. So it takes a lot of courage to do that, man. Very well done. What would you recommend to someone who's listening to this episode as far as a way of approaching what might be their leadership lid? They may not be able to see it, but what would be like a tip or a piece of advice you'd give them?
Well, the leadership lid, that's specifically, first of all, you need to read some of these books. You need to understand these concepts. But to break through the lid, one of the biggest concepts that I got out of leadership and self-deception was, if you're not doing what you want, there's going to be a lid. And when I say doing what you want, I don't mean if you want to go drink and party, go drink and party. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm about doing what you know is the right thing to do to make your business move forward. You need to do it. Because if you're not doing it, it's not going to grow. You're not going to be happy. The lid's going to be there. So like, for example, there's an internal struggle at the firm, or there's somebody that's got to be fired, or something like that that's got to happen. You know it, and you want to do it, but you're not doing it. That's a problem. That's a lid. That's putting a lid on your growth. So I would say evaluate your business and see what you want to do to make the business better, and just do it.
Perfect. So I've got an unfair question. Let's see if you can work with this. As you look back over your decades of growth, what do you think the 3 biggest strategies were that allowed you to grow the way you did?
Well, we were marketers. Marketing was a very important part of our growth, and we still are. It ranges anywhere from 25% to 40% of our budgets in marketing. So that's a biggie. The second biggest thing that I can say now, I would have probably answered this differently about 10 years ago, but now is that we made a concerted and specific effort to make our firm habit customer service. That's what I call it. Customer service is our firm's habit. So every decision that we make it through the lens of customer service. If you talk to anybody here in our firm and you say, what is your firm habit? They're going to say customer service. Because every meeting I talk about it, I mention it. Now, how did that change us? It changed us based on the numbers. I went to a firm leadership meeting, I don't know, 2 or 3 months ago, and everybody was talking about numbers, and they said, so what percentage of your cases do you get from former clients or current clients? And it was pretty normal for people to say, 5%. Probably the highest was 10%. Ours is over 30%. So the proof is in the numbers that when you start doing that and focusing on that, it's going to change the growth of your firm. Because there's so many firms out there that have horrible customer service. I mean, just fact. I tease around and say I want to be the Disney of law firms. So, because they have great customer service. So that's 2. You asked for 3. What would be a third area of growth, firm growth? It's concentrating on your people, the people that work here. We have probably one of the best training programs of any law firm that I know of. We've developed our own intranet, and I can go in, like if I'm a paralegal, if I need to learn something, I just go in and boom, pull up a video that's been made, because one of our operations people, she's just really good at shooting videos, training videos. So we have all these training videos. So we spend a lot of time investing in training. That's not how it was in the beginning. In the beginning, we would hire somebody and say, okay, you go sit over there with that paralegal and you figure it out. And I know that's how most firms are now.
Yes, sir.
Because we hire people, and they come in and they say, oh my gosh, I've never seen a training program like this. And I give the kudos, not me. I've got some amazing people that work for me that put it all together. So investing in your people not just the training, give them the right tools. I mentioned to you before we started that we're really moving into the AI right now. In fact, we moved into it so much, so fast that we said no more AI until after the first of the year, because we're just trying to get trained up and caught up with what we have. So, giving them the tools, I think that's helped the growth. I know that's helped the growth.
Great work. I mean, really great work. This is fantastic. If there was one piece of advice as you look back over your years of growth, and I'm really going to focus on you right now, Doug, you personally, what's the number one piece of time management advice that you would give to young professionals as they start to build their career? If they listen to you and like, I want to be like Doug when I grow up, what would be the most important time management or focus management advice you'd give them?
That's funny because I had this conversation with a young lawyer the other day. You got to have some balance. When I first started working before opening Burnetti, I worked for a litigation firm, and they required, I don't know, we would work 60 hours a week plus, which was too much. It was wrong. Looking back, that was just wrong for my family. Now it's different when we're in trial. When you're in trial, you're working. You don't stop working. So that's a different story. But as civil trial lawyers, we're only in trial. Maybe you're lucky if you're in trial 3 or 4 times a year. And that's just the way it is. So I would say that they need to have some balance in the beginning. They probably do need to work more, but as your career moves on, that needs to change. It changed a lot for me about 10 years ago. In fact, at this point, I only come into the office 3 days a week. I work from home 1 day a week. And then I try not to work 3 days a week. Now, as a younger lawyer, I get it. You can't do it. You have to put in your at least 45 hours a week. Sometimes like I said, if you're in trial more, because you're learning, and you're trying to figure it all out. But once you get into your rhythm, I've got one lawyer. I know he probably works 4 days a week, and and let me preface all this with, now with phones, we can work all the time, right? So like on the days I'm off, sure, I'm going to check my email here and there. I'm going to still call if I need to, but it's just different. It's at a different pace. It frees up my mind more. The 60, 70-hour week thing, I know lawyers that are doing it. I had this discussion with a lawyer at a regional lawyer meeting. And I told him, I said, because the topic came up, you got to take time off. You got to spend time away. You got to take 30 days off. I did that, by the way. I took 6 weeks off a few years ago. I was just off 3 weeks last month. I was in Africa for 3 weeks. So, you got to do those things. But anyway, this lawyer was saying, no, you can't do that. I work for guys and they work all the time. And I won't mention the guys they work for, but they're well known and you probably wouldn't. And they don't work all the time. But he said, they work all the time and they're just, tough. And that's just what you got to do. And I piped in and I said, dude, you're wrong. You're going to ruin your life. I said, all we have is time. Every minute you let go by is gone. Now, and I said, and I assure you, the people you're talking about, they don't work all the time like you're saying. I know them. And I felt bad for the guy because like 2 months later, he was working for one of these people and got fired. I'm thinking, this poor guy, I know he was working 60, 70 hours a week. So my point is, there's more to life than just working as a lawyer. In fact, I don't even like to call myself a lawyer. I should say I practice law because I don't want to identify with that's what I am. I'm also a dad, a grandfather, a lot of other things. So I think you get the gist of what I'm saying. You can be a happy, good lawyer, but not work 60 hours. That's what I'm saying.
Well, you are on the Great Life, Great Practice podcast. So it's perfectly aligned with everything that we're about. So it's perfect. Doug, what I'm going to do is I'm going to just stop here. And I just want to thank you. I want to thank you for coming on the show and being vulnerable, sharing your lessons, sharing the things that really made a difference for you, and ending so powerfully, encouraging lawyers to have a great life. Is there any last words of advice you'd like to share with our audience?
I think I just did.
I think it's perfect.
I think I just told you what I would do. I would not make my life. I would not make myself just a lawyer. I would make myself other things and a lawyer.
Doug, it's perfect. Absolutely perfect. Thank you. And thanks for being part of our show. And really, thanks for the contribution today. Thank you very much.
Look.
Thanks for joining this week's episode of Great Practice, Great Life. Please tune in weekly to get the next episode. If you enjoyed the episode, please subscribe, like, and don't hesitate to share it with a friend who you think this episode can help. With that, thanks, and I hope you enjoy next week's episode.